exciting to see everybody watching the videos, commenting, attending the Facebook Lives. And here we are for our mid-summit live Q&A. Glad to have you guys with us.
Absolutely. We are very excited to be able to present, life-changing information that really can truly change your metabolic health for the better, help you reverse insulin resistance, help you lose weight, help you reverse cardiovascular disease, as you learned 2 days ago. I mean, if we truly wanted to name this webinar properly, or name the summit properly, it would be how to reverse insulin resistance and cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's disease and a whole slew of conditions. So I hope that you guys are learning a lot, and we're super excited to, have a conversation today about, some questions and answers so that we can really clarify things that might seem a little confusing right off the bat.
Yes, you guys have put in a lot of great questions into the Facebook comment box. We have looked at them. We've made a list. So we're going to go through and answer a lot of questions tonight.
Absolutely. So right now we already have 203 people in the room, which is fantastic. We're expecting probably somewhere between 500 and 750 people today. And just like Robbie said, if you took even a couple minutes to write down a question in the comment box specifically about what you were confused about, we can answer those questions first, and then we're going to go into questions that you might have in the chat box. So if you're just joining us, please leave us a comment right now. Tell us where you are living. We love to see what kind of international audience we have. So have them go crazy. Susan says she's here. What's up, Susan?
Fantastic.
Gina here from Maryland. Sandra from Norfolk, Virginia. I have a feeling it's going to start moving fast. Heather from Denver, Colorado. Anthony from St. Louis. Oh boy, now it's moving fast. Celeste from Emeryville, California. Celeste, I used to work there. Nice work.
Texas representing strong.
Jennifer from New Hampshire. Sherry from Minneapolis. This is cool. Love it.
Brazil.
Okay. Robbie, do you mind watching the poll? Is the poll already up?
The poll is up. We have, let's see, 56% with either pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. We have about 35% who don't have diabetes. Type 1, pretty strong so far at 8%. Like to see that. Nobody with gestational diabetes, nobody with type 1.5 so far.
Not yet. All right.
Not yet.
Type 1 representing. I like it. Okay. So it looks like people are, oh, Mari from Tokyo. Nice work. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of Texases. What's the plural of Texas? Texi?
That's a good question. Texans.
Texans. A lot of Texies over here today. Lots of Californians in the house. It's true.
Lordy's a type 1.5. Excellent. Okay. Mm-hmm. Welcome.
It was cool. Okay. So keep your comments coming in. If you just got here, just make sure you tell us where you are coming from. And then also vote on this poll. We're going to disappear this poll in a couple minutes here. But maybe we can go into a couple of questions that have come in so far. And then just kind of start going at them one by one. Again, if at any point you have a question, please type it into the chat box. We have a team of people on the back end. We got Kylie and we got Jose here today. Thank you, Kylie. Thank you, Jose. And they're going to be filtering questions, and then we're going to be answering the questions that seem to be the most, common. So don't be shy. We're here to help, and we're here to try and clear things up as much as possible. First question comes from somebody on Facebook with the name Counseling Within. The question is, the meal that I need help with is breakfast. Can you suggest ideas for what to eat that's healthy and not time-consuming to prepare? So, Robbie, what you got?
Breakfast, we love to have fruit at Mastering Diabetes. That is a very easy breakfast. It's convenient. The key is to learn how to buy enough fruit. So I have a fruit rack behind me, if you can hopefully see that. And I buy, obviously, a lot more than you'll need because I eat tons and tons of fruit. But in general, a good tip for making sure you can have a really good, abundant, enough calories at breakfast is to buy enough fruit. And when you go to the grocery store, you think you have enough, double it. And then when you get home, you'll have all this great stuff in your pantry on your counter. And when you made that investment, you're not going to let it go to waste. You're going to eat it. It's going to help you build habits of eating fruit for breakfast. We also suggest adding in ground chia seeds or ground flax seeds. That's a nice insurance policy for your omega-3 fatty acids. If you haven't checked out the interview with Rick Dina, definitely check that out. You are going to want to see that. Don't miss that before it's over. That's a fruit breakfast. Now, you might be a little bit more insulin resistant, and you want to start out with some foods that maybe are much kinder on your blood glucose curve. And in that case, you can add things like beans. Beans could be a great breakfast. You can have, you can include greens and non-starchy vegetables. So you can tweak your breakfast to make sure you're getting the blood glucose result you're looking for as you optimize your insulin sensitivity.
Absolutely. Okay. Fantastic. Thanks for answering that. Next question comes from Janine. She says, I'm coming from Kansas and I want to learn why autoimmune disease is causing prediabetes. Okay, so Janine, let's clarify a couple of things here. Prediabetes is not an autoimmune condition. Prediabetes occurs when you have become sufficiently insulin resistant in your muscle and liver that it ends up trapping glucose inside of your blood and your blood glucose begins to rise. Think of prediabetes as the precursor to type 2 diabetes. It's kind of a warning sign that type 2 diabetes could be impending. And it's a really good warning sign to start changing your lifestyle immediately so that you don't go down the type 2 diabetes path. Type 1 and type 1.5 diabetes are autoimmune conditions. And it's got a slightly different physiology, even though it also results in you having high blood glucose. So the answer to your question would be, why is autoimmune disease causing prediabetes? Well, the answer is autoimmune disease does not cause prediabetes, but you may have an autoimmune version of diabetes. In order to determine that, you'd want to get an antibody test. And the antibody test will sort of test for multiple different antibodies. And if you test positive for even one of those, then that's an indicator that you do have an autoimmune condition. But if you simply just have elevated blood glucose and lifestyle change brings your blood glucose down into the normal range quickly, then that's a good indicator that chances are you don't necessarily have an autoimmune condition, and you can just proceed as if prediabetes is the diagnosis.
Perfect. Super simple.
Okay. All right. So Nancy Willis had a whole collection of questions, and I think a lot of them are sort of they're similar to a lot of other questions that we've been asking, or that people have been asking. So the first question is, when you transition to a plant-based diet or a low-fat plant-based whole food diet, as Robbie and I like to call it, is it okay to eat salt? Is salt a problem? And the answer is, in general, salt is not something that we recommend adding to your food, because the more salt you consume, the higher your risk for hypertension becomes, and the more challenging it's going to be to control your blood pressure, and it could also impede your progress in reversing insulin resistance. However, that being said, we realize that having a little bit of salt on your food that's a simple way to get you to eat more plants, I'm cool with it. Robbie's cool with it. Okay, so if you want to use a little bit of salt, use a little bit of salt. It's okay. A couple sprinkles here and there is not a big deal. Try and limit your total sodium intake to about 1,000 milligrams per day. And if you do that and you eat more plants as a result of it, we are happy.
100%. Absolutely. And I think people are surprised to see how much sodium they'll get just from eating their whole foods, which is, you're totally covered there. So you don't need it for health reasons. It's just a flavor agent. And like Sarah said, that helps you stick to the diet, go for it.
Okay, so then the next question is about, coconut cream, coconut milk, things like this that you end up either finding in your food or that you might want to add to your food to add flavor. So, Robbie, if somebody wants to add some of these, coconut-based products, what would you say? Yeah.
So again, some of these foods that you're eating in like very small quantities, you start to become like, in some situations, you're like splitting hairs. Like, it's usually not that big of a deal for having a small amount. It becomes a big deal when you're having too much and you're not getting the results you're looking for. So focus on as much of the green light foods and the yellow light foods in their whole form as possible. And then these, small amounts of these added creamers here or there, like it's optional. It's up to you. We're not the food police. We're just here giving you the optimal path to get to your goals as quickly as possible. And these smaller maneuvers off the path that you make, it's totally up to you. And obviously, each one's going to be different. Like some of these products might be, have more additives or more preservatives and all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, like look at the ingredients. If you're going to have, coconut cream that's really just a couple ingredients, it's just processed, then it might not be the end of the world. But always be cognizant of how much fat is in even a small amount of those products.
Yes, very, very, very good point. It's funny because this idea that like monitoring and sort of like just taking into account your total fat consumption and that can have an effect on your blood glucose is a little backwards, because you think to yourself, well, what the heck does fat have to do with glucose, or fat have to do with blood sugar, blood glucose? The two of them are separate, right? But in reality, yeah, they might exist separately or they might have different names, but they interact with each other inside of your blood. They interact with each other inside of your muscles, inside of your liver. And so monitoring your fat intake is the gateway to allowing you to control your blood glucose, even though most of the diabetes world doesn't understand that your fat intake is actually what's causing variable blood glucose.
100%.
Okay, so then there's two more questions here about salad dressings. Salad dressings are something that can be a little bit challenging to make, but it's actually dirt simple. So if you're in a situation where you want to add some salad dressings to your food, here's a simple formula. Literally just write this down. Take some vinegar. It doesn't matter what kind. Balsamic vinegar, apple cider vinegar, sherry vinegar, white wine vinegar, pear vinegar. It doesn't really matter. Take a tablespoon or two of vinegar, add it to a glass. You can add 1 or 2 tablespoons of water as well to dilute the flavor just a little bit. Then go to your spice cupboard and pull out your favorite spices. If you want Mediterranean, add some sage and thyme and oregano. If you want Indian spices, add some curry powder and some black pepper and maybe some chili powder. If you want some, you can take a seasoning blend and you can add it to that as well. Doesn't really matter. You take your favorite spices, you add it to that, you mix the whole thing up, you dump it on your vegetables, you have yourself a really good tasting salad dressing. It's really straightforward, and vinegar itself is actually it helps reduce your blood pressure. There's plenty of research about that. So it's kind of a double whammy. It tastes good, and it also helps you improve your metabolic health at the same time.
And we also, we do have we offer, specific dressing recipes in our online course for the coaching program. Sometimes we do challenges in there with like a dressing challenge. And a lot of times people get creative. So don't, just like Sarah said, don't hesitate to just get creative. Throw in some of your favorite ingredients, throw in those core ingredients, the spices you want. It doesn't have to be that difficult.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So I'm just still looking at the chat box here. We have 400 people here so far, which is awesome. So if you guys are just joining us, make sure that you write your questions in the chat box. We're answering questions that people have left before the webinar, and hopefully we'll be able to get to your questions as well. Robbie, there's a really cool question here, one of our favorite topics of all, which is from Ken and Lisa Jordan. And they're asking, they say, the keto health professionals or the ketogenic health professionals that come from the low carbohydrate philosophy are super convincing, and they make you afraid to want to eat fruit. They say that that if you consume fruit, you're likely to develop cancer, and they say that if you're living with diabetes, your risk for cancer goes up, and if you were to eat fruit, then you can actually increase your risk for developing cancer, or you can actually feed an existing cancer. So the question in my mind is, could you talk to us about whether we are able to consume fruit and whether that's safe or not for people living with diabetes? So before you answer that, Robbie, if you also have this question in your head about, is fruit safe and you're kind of worried about eating fruit, please type in the comment box. I want to see the word fruit, because I remember it was such a big deal for me. And if you're also thinking that, I just want to know. So go ahead, Robbie.
Let's see if the chat box is going to explode here.
Blow up as well.
In one of the interviews that came out today with Jim Loomis, he talked about the difference between the fructose that's used in the research showing that fructose is bad versus the difference between the fructose and other sugars that are in whole foods, okay? It is completely different. And again, we're open we're all about looking at evidence-based papers, but Cyrus and I have never seen a paper that showed increased fruit consumption, whole fruit consumption, leading to poor health outcomes. As a matter of fact, when they do study how much fruit people eat, it's shown that the more fruit people eat in these epidemiological studies, their health improves. Less diabetes. I mean, it's shown over and over again. So when people make a claim like that, I would genuinely ask for the evidence. Give them ask for the citation. Like, what research paper showed that that's the case? And I think it also just comes back to understanding insulin resistance, which is what this whole summit is about. So the ketogenic community is, I mean, to a certain extent, they are admitting that they're insulin resistant in the fact that they cannot eat carbohydrate-rich foods. They've eaten themselves into a state of carbohydrate intolerance. And so they're insulin resistant. So, I mean, I don't know, you can add more to that, Cyrus.
Absolutely. So there's actually research that dates back to the 1920s, 1920. We're looking at almost 100 years worth of research in which researchers have experimented with both animals and with human beings. And they've taken people who already have pre-existing diabetes, whether pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, and fed them a diet that contains more fruit. And these research studies show over and over and over and over again that when you increase carbohydrate content from fresh fruit and starchy vegetables in substitution for higher fat and higher protein foods, you actually improve your diabetes health and your blood glucose comes down and your insulin requirements fall. And, this was first shown back by Dr. Sweeney, Dr. Rabinowitz. It was then went into, what is his name? Dr. Himsworth, like one of the most profound diabetes researchers on the planet. In the 1950s, there was a guy named Dr. Walter Kempner out of Duke University. And he invented a thing called the rice fruit diet, where he fed his patients who were living with type 2 diabetes nothing but rice, white rice, fruits, fruit juice, and table sugar. He literally added table sugar to his patients' meals. And they were eating nothing but these 4 foods, and he found that their blood pressure tanked. It came down very quickly. Their blood glucose came down. They reversed type 2 diabetes. They reversed hypertension. They reversed liver disease. And they reversed retinopathy in their eyes. And then, since that time, there have been many, many, many other researchers who have shown the same thing. So if you're in a situation where you're saying, oh, I'm worried about fruit, can fruit feed diabetes? Can fruit feed cancer? The answer is no, because the whole package matters. When you eat a fruit, you're eating carbohydrate, fat, and protein. You're also getting vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, and phytochemicals. Those protective micronutrients are there to actually boost metabolic function. When you're eating a refined sugar that's a white crystal or a syrup or an additive in a food, those do not behave the same way as a whole food. Those refined sweeteners are the ones that are going to cause problems, and they're going to feed cancerous conditions. They're going to feed diabetes. They're going to feed hypertension. Whole foods do not do that. They never will, and they never have, and they never will.
And just to add to that, I mean, the research is endless. We could talk about so many different researchers, and we are not suggesting that people do the rice fruit diet. Like, we know better, we can do better. But even in 1971, Dr. Brunzell did a study where he fed people nothing but table sugar and protein. It was a 0% fat diet. And he saw that the insulin levels and blood glucose levels were lower on oral glucose tolerance tests compared to the basal diet. So literally adding, again, refined sugar in a low-fat environment improved their diabetes control and diabetes numbers. So, and it's over. We could go on and on this entire presentation about the research on this specific topic. But the point is, ask the people who made those claims to show you the studies. Start there. Get into the research. It's actually not that hard, and understand what the evidence actually says.
Mm-hmm. There was maybe you remember the movie Jerry Maguire from back in the mid-'90s with Tom Cruise. What was the name of the actor? Let's say Show the Money. Cuba Gooding Jr. Thank you. He was an athlete, and he was trying to secure a deal with his sports agent, and his sports agent was proposing that he go play for a different team, and he kept on saying, "Show me the money, show me the money," and this was this like catchphrase. So when people say you can't eat fruit because it's going to feed diabetes or cancer, turn to them and say, show me the research. Show me the research, okay? That can be a counter line that you have. And most of the time, people are going to come up with nothing because they don't have research to back up said claim.
Okay.
One thing that I also do want to mention here is that we're going to talk about the Forks Over Knives meal planner in a little bit here, because the Forks Over Knives meal planner is an unbelievably powerful piece of technology that can help you transition to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. It's by far the best meal planner that we've ever seen before, and we'll kind of give you a little run-through of it. But if you're interested in increasing your fruit intake, the Forks Over Knives meal planner has a whole collection of recipes that are fruit-centric, and I think you guys are really going to like it because they're tasty, and if you have the confidence to be able to eat these fruit recipes, I think you're really going to like them.
It's beautiful. I mean, I'm a little bit biased in the sense that I was part of the team that built it originally, and really proud of the product and the experience that people are having with it. So we're excited to show it to you guys.
Okay, so here's the next question about eating fat, and this can be, again, kind of something that's difficult to wrap your head around. But let's clarify this because it's a very, very, very important topic. There's a couple of questions that have come in about fat. Number one, when you speak of eating no more than 30 grams of fat per day, is this only saturated fat or is this total fat? That's question one. Question two, if you're trying to reverse a collection of diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, fatty liver disease, is the most important thing to do is to drop your fat intake to as close to zero as possible? Or if you were to include some fatty foods like avocados and nuts and seeds and maybe a little bit of olive oil in your diet, is that okay or is that not okay? So, Robbie, let's start at the top. When we're talking about no more than 30 grams of fat per day, are we talking about total fat or saturated fat only?
Total fat.
Total fat. That's exactly right. So we recommend using in our coaching program, we teach you how to actually monitor your total fat intake. And once you start to really get eyes on it, you start to see exactly how much you are eating. And if you keep your total fat intake less than 30 grams, it makes a huge difference in your blood glucose control.
And the research shows this over and over and over again. We can go back to the crew if we want. I mean, Pritikin, Anderson, Klein, Wright. It just doesn't. Shintani. Like, these people use these studies in metabolic ward settings in a lot of cases, and it works the best when it's that range of fat.
Yes, exactly right. Okay, so now the question is, what about nuts and seeds? What about avocados? What about coconuts? What about olive oil?
Okay. Go ahead.
And and the healthy fat. People use this word all the time. Oh, well, avocados are a healthy fat. Nuts are a healthy fat. If I were to eat these, I heard they were good for me. So what's the problem? Okay. So one thing that I want to get abundantly clear is that we are not the fat police. We are not shaming fat found in food. We are not telling you to eat a zero fat diet. We are not telling you to eliminate fat from your diet. A, it's not possible. B, it's not intelligent. What we are recommending that you do is A, measure your total fat intake. B, control your total fat intake. And C, bring your total fat intake down to a point that it enables you to reverse insulin resistance inside of your liver and inside of your muscle. So again, it's not a no-fat diet. This is a low-fat, a truly low-fat plant-based whole food diet. And when you migrate towards a low-fat approach, you can then start to see dramatic improvements in your blood glucose control. So that being said, if you're eating small amounts of nuts or seeds or olives or coconuts in your diet, that's totally fine. There's no problem with these foods at all. In fact, they're healthful foods for you. They contain very valuable micronutrients and very valuable phytochemicals that are essential for cellular health. They're essential for brain function. They're essential for eye function. They're essential for kidney and liver function, for heart function, you name it. So we're not telling you to eliminate these foods altogether. What we do recommend is making sure that on a daily basis, your total fat intake is controlled to be no more than 15% of your total calorie intake. And when you do that, there's space for nuts and space for seeds and avocados and coconuts and fatty foods in general. The one food that we would recommend you eliminate is oil. I don't care if it's olive oil or coconut oil or rice bran oil or sesame oil or canola oil or vegetable oil. It doesn't matter. It could be motor oil. The idea here is that oil is not a food. Oil is the highest calorie density food on the planet. And we've been brainwashed to believe that oil is something that you need for your cardiovascular health. In reality, the answer is oil is one of the most detrimental things you can put in your mouth for your cardiovascular health. So the very condition that it worsens is the condition that the public believes it betters. Okay, and that's all marketing. That's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant deceptive marketing.
Sorry, so we got to add to this when it comes to the marketing point.
Yes.
If you guys want a funny video, Google Jeff Novick Pam oil spray to see the whole thing. But
Brilliant.
Just the idea that these marketers have been smooth enough to sell a product that is literally 100% fat, say on the product in big letters, 0 fat. But literally the Pam spray oil says 0 fat, and that's because they changed the serving size to 1/3 of a second of a spray. I mean, it's just, there's a certain amount of pride that comes into making some of these dietary decisions and getting away from the marketing hoopla.
Absolutely, 100%. So point being is that if there is oil in your diet, we absolutely recommend getting rid of oil altogether. Not only will it help you reverse insulin resistance, not only will it improve your liver function, not only will it improve your kidney function, not only will it help you think better, it'll also help you reduce your risk for atherosclerosis. It'll drop your blood pressure. It'll drop your cholesterol level. Okay, it's one of the most problematic ingredients in the entire food supply, and yet people are sort of, brainwashed to believe that it's required.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's not only is it not required, it's actually one of the most detrimental foods you can put in your mouth. So eliminate all oils. There's definitely space for nuts and seeds and avocados and coconuts and fatty plants in general. But again, try and keep your total fat consumption to less than 15% of your total calorie intake. And then that right there is how you maximize your insulin sensitivity, in addition to many other tools.
That's it. Super simple.
Okay. Next question is a follow-up question about saturated fat. In terms of raising cholesterol, does the source of the saturated fat matter? Let's put it this way. Mike, this is a very good question. The type of fat matters. Saturated fat will raise your blood cholesterol more than cholesterol itself. I will repeat that. Saturated fat in your diet will raise your blood cholesterol more than the cholesterol in your food will do. So what that means is that, yes, we want you to bring your saturated fat down as close to 0 as possible. That's just your saturated fat. But when you transition to a plant-based diet, you will naturally eat less saturated fat and you will eat a little bit more unsaturated fat. And that switch from saturated to unsaturated makes a profound change on your cardiovascular and diabetes health. So saturated fat comes mainly from animal products. It comes from beef. It comes from meat. It comes from chicken. It comes from fish. It comes from eggs. It comes from dairy products. Okay, so you want to reduce those foods or eliminate them altogether, and then move over to more plant-based foods. And naturally, your saturated fat content will go down, and your unsaturated fat content will go up. Okay. Robbie, Dr. William Gibson in his interview mentioned the 15-15 rule. Does anybody know what this is? Can you go into a little bit of detail about it?
Okay, I believe he was probably referring to if your blood glucose is low, you eat 15 grams of carbohydrate and then wait 15 minutes to test your blood glucose again before eating more carbohydrate. So you see what's your blood glucose, and if you're still low, then you try 15 more, and then you wait 15 minutes. And a lot of cases, if you're living with type 1 diabetes or any form of insulin-dependent diabetes and you've experienced a really, truly low blood glucose, you feel like you're starving. Like you want to eat the whole fridge, the whole kitchen, all the fruit. Like you're just like, gimme, gimme, gimme. But then you end up being high 15, 20 minutes later. So that's why it's key to be cognizant and be careful about the just eat 15, test yourself 15 minutes, and see where you're at.
Yep, that's exactly right. Okay, next question comes from Paul Adams. This is a brilliant question, actually. Have you heard of berberine and or any other natural supplements that help lower your blood glucose values? So, Paul, this is a brilliant question. So the answer is yes. Berberine is a isolated compound. It's a compound that is isolated from plants, and it is incredibly powerful at reducing your blood glucose. So it is known and has been documented in the peer-reviewed evidence-based research to be very effective at reducing your blood glucose. The problem is that berberine is literally one of the worst tasting things you could put into your mouth. I've tried to put it in many times. It is real tough. There's a whole collection of plants that are very powerful at reducing blood glucose. And we actually searched the planet for a food that can help reduce your blood glucose and do it in a way that actually, is repeatable, but also in a way that's doable in the long term. And so another plant that we found is not only effective for reducing your blood glucose, but also the world's most powerful cholesterol reducing food ever discovered is called amla, A-M-L-A, or another name for it is Indian gooseberries. These come from India. They're the size of a grape. They're little green things, quite sour, but they're palatable. We took amla, we mixed it with green tea, and we made a tea that's called amla green tea. And this amla green tea is something that a lot of people have been using it. Thousands of people have been using it and telling us just how powerful it is at reducing their blood glucose and their blood pressure and their cholesterol at the same time. And there's a lot of peer-reviewed evidence-based research in support of amla. And over the course of time, we found that it's a very, very, very powerful addition to your diet. So I would recommend trying amla green if you haven't tried it already. There's maybe someone can post. Oh yeah, there's a post right. There's a link in the chat box right now. Click on that. Go to the page. Watch the video that's on there. Just watch it and convince yourself that amla is something that can benefit you. And if you think so, then go ahead and try it, and let's see how powerful it can be in your body.
Got to give it a shot. See what happens.
100%.
Nothing to lose. It's the fun part about amla. There's no negative side effects, Cyrus. It's only positive side effects.
Only positive side effects. Only positive side effects. What's that? And it's not a medication. It's not a supplement. This is a food. This is a real food, a whole food that has been ground into a powder. Nothing has been removed from it. The only thing that's been removed from it is technically water. That's it. But it's not necessarily like an isolated, compound or an oil. It's literally just ground up, dehydrated amla berries mixed with green tea. Robbie, next question is, I did a raw food diet a la Gabriel Cousins, just like you did, Robbie. It worked perfectly, but I could not adhere to such a strict practice. No one has really talked much about this sort of plant-based ketogenic approach. Isn't it true that most nutrients are destroyed in cooking? How about in fruit? I just love some thoughts here about the plant-based ketogenic diet and whether or not it's something that's beneficial in the long term.
Okay, yeah, so some brief thoughts. Again, I don't know you or your exact experience, but I know in general, a lot of people will try something like that and they will think, oh, it's working. So in my case, I was having a flatter line blood glucose and I was taking less insulin. So I could say, oh, it was working. But what ended up happening is I had no energy. I felt terrible. And there's just a lot of confusion about, especially for those living with any form of insulin-dependent diabetes, there's confusion around this idea of driving your insulin dosages as low and low and low as possible is not necessarily a smart thing. That would only be smart is if you knew at the same time your pancreas was beginning to start producing more and more of its own, because you want to get to a place where you're producing or injecting a physiological normal amount, what your pancreas would normally secrete when eating a healthy diet, which is somewhere between 30 and 50 units per day, okay? That comes from a Harvard endocrinologist who made that recommendation there. So I was down to like 10 units a day, but it doesn't mean I was healthy. It doesn't mean I was more insulin sensitive. As a matter of fact, I was more insulin resistant, even though I was using less total insulin. So in a lot of cases, people think it's working, but what I would say is if you're becoming carbohydrate intolerant, it's not working, and you're increasing your risk for all the diseases associated with diabetes, heart disease, cancer, erectile dysfunction, the list goes on and on and on. So when it comes to raw food, yeah, we're big advocates of eating lots of fruit and lots of greens, but there just really isn't that much research on the topic. So I technically eat a raw food diet, but to me, it's just a personal experiment. It's not like I can say, yes, this is totally gonna work, and when I'm 100 years, like I'm gonna live to be 100 years old or something, because we actually don't have that. The evidence-based research shows that the longest lived people on the planet included mostly starch. I mean, this is what Dr. John McDougall talks about. They ate starch-based diet. So in our modern environment, that's where the science is, that's where the research is. If you want to do a personal experiment and you want to eat tons more fruit just like me, I mean, go ahead. We, again, at our coaching program, are always recommending that people continue to get regular blood work. I mean, that's part of one of our modules in our online course is what blood work to get, talk to your doctor, and assess your progress along the way, and see how you're feeling and make decisions based on the goals that you have. So we love raw food. Eat as much of it as you feel comfortable.
Okay, so Robbie, as you were talking, I started to think, I'm going to draw on the screen here. It's going to take me a couple minutes to like pull up the drawing and create it. But in the meantime, there's another question which I think is really, really, really important. And I think there's a lot of people that are in this same situation. So let's go into this one and then we'll come back. Karen, she basically says, hey, listen, I have a question about how to transition to a plant-based diet without spiking my blood glucose. So I lost almost 50 pounds over the past 3 years by being on a ketogenic diet, and my blood glucose stabilized in the low fives, in the metric system. I was told I was no longer diabetic 2 years ago. However, after transitioning to be more plant-based or to being a vegan, and by watching the Mastering Diabetes, videos that you guys put out, now my blood glucose is all over the place. I really want to stop eating meat. I want to stop eating dairy. I want to stop eating fish. But every time I add more lentils, beans, starchy vegetables, and fruit into my diet, my blood glucose goes weird. What is happening?
Okay, you want me to answer this one?
Yeah, why don't you answer this one?
Okay, so yeah, so I mean, what's likely happened in this case is you have eaten your way into a state of insulin resistance. So you've eaten a high-fat diet for such an extended period of time that you have a lot of stored fat inside your muscle and liver cells. That's what's going on. This is stuff we've seen from Neil Barnard, Gerald Schulman doing, MRI studies here and showing that this is fat inside your cells that are leading to insulin resistance. So as you begin to transition out of that, there's a phase where you're definitely more insulin resistant. And when you're insulin resistant, it's not as easy for your body to process these foods that we're talking about, even if it's beans or potatoes or fruit. So there's several different ways to approach getting out of a very insulin resistant state. And one of them is making sure at each meal you are including a large amount of either greens or non-starchy vegetables. Those foods will have a very helpful effect at blunting the blood glucose rise so it doesn't go as high. And that's very helpful. But again, you're going to want to do exercise. That's a big part of the Mastering Diabetes program. You are going to want to probably incorporate intermittent fasting. That'll help get the excess fat out of those cells. But patience is your friend here. And this is really, this exact question, like this experience that you are going through, is why Cyrus and I created the coaching program that we created. So we could help people through those nuances on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it's something we're just so passionate about because we know there are people going through that. And when we can see what's going on with you and we can see all the details, we can help really solve the problem. I mean, it's not that hard. It just takes paying attention to the details and the nuances and getting yourself into a more insulin-sensitive state. If you do a lot of those things and something still isn't working, then we ask people to get a C-peptide test. And invariably, when somebody's actually doing it and the results aren't as we expected, they get a C-peptide test and we find out that they're not producing sufficient quantities of endogenous insulin. That they either have insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes where their pancreas is exhausted and they're not producing enough insulin, or they do have some antibodies, and they're living with type 1.5 diabetes. So hope that's helpful. I think you're muted, Cyrus. Can you hear me? For some reason, maybe it's just me. Can everybody else hear Cyrus? Let's see. It could be my computer. If you can hear Cyrus, write in the chat box, yes. If you cannot hear Cyrus, write no. No. For some reason, we can't hear you, Cyrus, which is very weird. Something about drawing has made us not be able to hear you, which is very odd. Yeah, we can't hear you. So I don't know how to. I will turn your mic off and turn it back on and see what happens. Oh, I don't know how to turn it back on. Can you turn it back on? Still can't hear you. That's so weird. It might be just a glitch with the software. So Cyrus will leave and he'll come back, and we'll take a look at the drawing. But in the meantime, we will continue to answer some of these questions here. Let's see, what do I got here? Do I need to include fats, avocado, flax seeds in each meal? The answer to that question is no. You do not need to. So this whole question of fat-soluble vitamins and people being concerned about, oh, I have to add a little bit of avocado to absorb the nutrients in my salad. This whole topic is completely inaccurate and blown out of proportion. When you actually, again, go and look at the research, there is no strong evidence to show that you need to add fat to a meal in order to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins. It is just not true. When you eat a whole food meal, you get plenty of fat automatically. It gets built into the food. Nature built it in. You will absorb your nutrients. You do not need to worry about it. Sorry, you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that technical glitch. I don't know what happened. I was trying to draw on the screen, and that clearly is not working, so we're going to abandon that. Maybe we'll do it on another episode. Okay, one thing that I do want to do, let's take a quick break here, because I want to give you guys, there's a lot of questions that are coming in about, what exactly to eat, because I think a lot of people have a good understanding of, I understand low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet, fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, fine, reduced meat, fish, dairy products, no oil. I get it, but it's confusing to a lot of people. And so there's a lot of questions that are coming in about, what are some good breakfasts? What are some good lunches? What are some good dinners? How do I make salad dressing? How about desserts? What happens if I go slightly hypoglycemic? What am I supposed to do? And I remember being at the beginning of this process where I also had those same questions where I was like, okay, so do I just eat just a lot of bananas, or what do I eat them with? And it became a little confusing for me to understand how to construct a meal and how to make that meal fun and exciting and different than the meal that I ate the day before, right? So long story short, over the course of time, when I made my transition to a plant-based diet, it was 2002. Robbie made his transition in 2006. Am I right, Robbie?
Correct.
Yeah. So back in the day, we transitioned to a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet when it was not cool, okay? There were no businesses like Mastering Diabetes, like Forks Over Knives. There were no docu-series available. There were very few books that were actually talking about this, and the conversation about how to transition to a plant-based diet for diabetes was like this big. Okay, now it's a big conversation and a lot of people are having this. But I remember back at the time, we had to just make it work. So we dug for information everywhere we could, and we ended up making it work. And part of the Mastering Diabetes ethos here is to try and help people that are in the same boat as us, as we were, make the transition in an easier way. So that, we know a lot of the questions that you guys are going to ask, and this whole food preparation question is a big deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to give you guys a run through of the Forks Over Knives meal planner. The Forks Over Knives meal planner is 100% free. and it is a really cool tool that you can use to transition to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet with confidence. So I'm going to give you guys a run through of it and show you guys how it works. And then if you guys are interested in signing up for it, go for it. I highly recommend it. It's well worth your time and something that's going to simplify this transition towards a whole food plant-based diet.
It's free. There's really no reason not to try it.
Okay, yeah. So let me share my screen here real quickly.
So we got Gene in the audience saying it's wonderful. That's great.
Oh yeah, already used it, huh? Okay, sorry. Give me 1 second, Robbie. Technical glitch. Go to one more question here, and I'll come back to that in just 1 second.
Okay, so let's see what we got here. Okay, somebody's asking, is it possible to reverse type 1 diabetes eating a vegan diet? So the answer to that question is we do not have any reliable, repeatable evidence for how to reverse type 1 diabetes. I know there are several people who have shared and made some claims on this topic, like anecdotal evidence, but there is no research or any evidence to show that we know how to get beta cells to produce insulin again, or to get new beta cells in a person living with type 1 diabetes who has had their beta cells basically completely annihilated, which is me and Cyrus. I mean, I have a C-peptide level of less than 0.1. It's undetectable. So in order to do this, I believe we can figure it out. I definitely do. We just don't have the answer now, but it's a two-pronged issue. Number one, we got to figure out how to address the antibodies. So we recommend people get antibodies tested. I had mine tested. I'm not positive for GAD, but I am positive for IA2. Could be positive for others because I didn't have all 6 of them tested. And there could be antibodies that we haven't discovered that I could be positive for. So you never really know. But in order to find a solution to type 1 diabetes, we got to stop the antibodies. We got to figure out, lower those numbers and demonstrate that we can do that repeatedly. And then the next step of the solving type 1 diabetes would be to figure out how to create new beta cells, whether that's in our own body, having stem cells create new beta cells in our own body, which science has shown so far was very difficult. It's not easy to do. Or some type of treatment that would allow us to have functioning beta cells again. So that's sort of what's necessary. We don't have that solution yet, but I certainly have hope, and hope other type 1s out there also do as well. And let's continue living as healthily as we can and put our body in the best state of health possible for when something new like that does become available.
Great response. Great response. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's get this rolling. Okay, what do you see on your screen? Do you see an image?
Okay. Loading. There it is. Yes.
Okay, so here we go. Let me show you exactly what this meal planner looks like on the inside. It's really simple. So first you'll create an account. It's completely free and there's no credit card required to try it for 14 days. Simply select how many people the plan is for and whether you have any food intolerances. So I don't, so I'm just going to say next. So signing up is actually really quick, and once you get inside, there's a handy getting started video, which you can see right here. Now, the first thing that you're going to see is your meal planning dashboard. So every week, the Forks Over Knives chefs will send you a 5-day meal plan with recipes that can all be prepared within 35 minutes or less. And at the bottom here, you can add day 6 and day 7 if you want to. So what I love most about the meal planner is that it's super customizable. So I can change a lot of things. So I can remove the pasta primavera right here. And I don't want this 7-layer taco dip, so I choose swap. Then I can browse for a recipe and I can type in tomatoes, lentils, and carrots because I have them in my fridge. And then I can choose this lentil bolognese because it looks good. And let's say I want to have this on Tuesday and then the tabbouleh on Wednesday. I can just drag and drop things and move them around super easily. Now, this meal planner auto-generates my grocery list and the weekend prep cheat sheet. So then the grocery list, I can just check off items that I already have at home. And then I can access this on my phone or on my tablet when I'm shopping at the grocery store. And then you can also add your own ingredients to the list. And then when it comes to the weekend prep cheat sheet, this is something that really sets this meal planner apart. So here, what this does is it guides you through the process of batch cooking and baking and freezing and everything that you're going to need for the week ahead. And it super simplifies the process of making food. And with one click, you can save this to a PDF and have it with you so that if that's easier for you. So I hope this kind of gives you a good idea of how this whole meal planner works. It's a really cool technology, and it's something that the Forks Over Knives team has worked really hard on creating. I said earlier that it was it's free, and that's a true statement. It is actually a free trial, meaning that if you sign up for it, you can start 14 days for free. You can get the full experience, and then after that point, if you want to continue, you're welcome to do it. There's no obligation at all. So if you're in a position where you're sort of, trying to find ways to make more sophisticated food or trying to understand exactly what to make, I highly, highly, highly recommend using the meal planner. We've been using it for a long time. We constantly are making Forks Over Knives recipes, and they don't disappoint. They really don't. They work real hard on it, and it's well worth having it on your side to help you out.
Yeah, there's a little pop-up on your screen now, so you can click that button if you want to go and give it a little whirl. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, it's super cool. And trust us when we say we've tried out a lot of meal planners and a lot of sort of food preparation services, and the Forks Over Knives meal planner just blows away a lot of the other services out there. So, rather than tinkering around with things that may add value, we recommend obviously using the Forks Over Knives meal planner because it gets the job done, and the recipes are phenomenal. They really are.
100%.
Okay.
All right, we got a lot more questions.
All right. So here's a question. I don't know who it came from, but there's somebody who says, "Listen, I'm 73 years old, and I want to try a program, but I just don't know where to begin. I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I'm concerned that this is not going to help for somebody of my age. So does the Mastering Diabetes program work, or does transitioning to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet work for somebody who is in their 70s? And the answer is without a doubt. The reason I say that is because we've had many people who are in their 60s and 70s and some even in their 80s who have come and tried the transition to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, skeptical that it wasn't going to work. And I was skeptical that it wasn't going to work because I thought, well, if you've been living with diabetes for 30, 40, 50 years, maybe there's too much metabolic dysfunction that has occurred, and maybe insulin sensitivity is not something that's going to happen. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong. We see time and time again that people who transition to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, you can do it at the age of 2. You can do it at the age of 25. You can do it at the age of 125. I literally do not care how old you are, because the metabolic benefits that you will gain from a low-fat, plant-based whole food transition supersede your age. It has nothing to do with how old you are. And there's story after story after story of people that have made this transition and made a significant improvement in their overall health. And one particular story is Marilyn. Marilyn comes to mind. She is in her 70s. She's been living with type 1 diabetes for longer than I've been alive. I think she's been living for 50 plus years. When she came to us, she had been eating a ketogenic diet for years, and she was bedridden. She not bedridden, home ridden, meaning that she could sit on her couch, she could muster up the energy to kind of be indoors, but getting up and walking around, going outside, watering her plants, not even in the question. So she came to us and said, "Hey, can you guys help?" And we said, "We sure hope so." So we started working with her, and over the course of time, not only was her blood glucose very controllable, but her energy levels started to creep up and creep up and creep up and creep up and creep up. I lost track of her. We recently regained contact with Marilyn, and Marilyn has now been following us, I think, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years or so. Marilyn now rides her bike something like 10 to 15 miles a day, something that she never even dreamed was possible. Her blood glucose is super controllable. Her insulin use either hasn't changed or has gone down. And she says that this is, without question, one of the most beneficial things that she's ever done in her life. And again, this is just one story. So if you're concerned about this at an age of 60 or beyond, please don't be concerned about it. It works like wildfire.
And actually, I just pasted a link into the chat box, which is a story. It's a video that I wrote about on the Forks Over Knives website many years ago. It's an elderly woman who was taking she was taking insulin for over 20 years, and she adopted a low-fat plant-based whole food diet. She got off insulin, she lost 35 pounds, and she reversed heart disease. And I believe she was over 80 when she started. So you have to watch the video to confirm that, but no reason not to do it.
Okay, and we also have Glenna in the room right now. And Glenna, I freaking love Glenna. She's so cool. So Glenna has now been doing this program for about a year, maybe just a little over a year at this point. Glenna has lost, let me back up. Glenna is how old? Glenna is now 77 years old. So she started this program when she was about 76. She has lost 80 pounds at the age of 76. Glenna also went from using 75 units of insulin per day to 5 units of insulin per day. 75 to 5. She dropped a whole bunch of weight. She feels better. She looks better. She gets comments from friends all over the place about how good she looks. And her blood glucose is very well controlled. So Glenna, my hat's off to you. You're another perfect example that age just doesn't matter. Okay, I have pain in my feet. Sandy asked this. I have pain in my feet and legs at night when I'm trying to sleep. I know that it has to do with what I ate during the day and with living with type 2 diabetes. Can you explain what happens and why I'm experiencing pain in my feet? So Sandy, the answer is likely that you are experiencing a condition known as peripheral neuropathy. Neuropathy is just a fancy scientific super nerd way of referring to nerve damage caused by high blood glucose. So high blood glucose can be a real pain in the butt because high blood glucose unto itself is not, nobody dies from diabetes. Nobody just miraculously falls over as a result of having diabetes. You die from the complications of diabetes. You suffer in the long term from organ dysfunction that happens as a result of having high blood glucose, because tissues in all around your body become inflammatory and become inflamed when your blood glucose goes high. So that happens inside of your brain. It happens inside of your heart muscle. It happens inside of your liver, your kidneys, your pancreas, your muscles. It also happens inside of your nerves. And when your nerves get inflamed as a result of having blood glucose fluctuations and high blood glucose over long periods of time, then you end up experiencing either pins and needles in your extremities, or sometimes you can get lightning bolts going through your legs and lightning bolts going through your arms. Very, very, very common. Peripheral neuropathy in 80, 90, 95% of the time is a reversible condition. In order to reverse peripheral neuropathy, the first thing that's most important is to get your blood glucose under control. If your glucose is controlled, then you stand a chance of reversing peripheral neuropathy. In order to get your blood glucose under control and reverse insulin resistance at the same time, we obviously recommend a transition to a low-fat plant-based whole food diet. When you do that, it actually happens pretty darn quickly. And we have a number of people that have reversed peripheral neuropathy, no longer live with it, and feel like a million bucks.
Beautiful. Okay. Kind of along the same lines here, Cyrus, but lots of people are asking, why is their fasting blood glucose high?
Oh, it's one of my favorite topics. Okay. Why is your fasting blood glucose high? Okay, in the middle of the night when you're sleeping, you're not eating any food. Chances are you're not eating any food, okay? So the glucose that is floating in your bloodstream is coming mainly from your liver, okay? So there's no glucose that's coming in from your mouth, and therefore the glucose in circulation is being regulated by your liver and your pancreas, okay? So the two of these organs are doing the exact opposite. Your liver is putting glucose into your blood, and your pancreas is manufacturing insulin to try and get glucose out of your blood. So the two of them are sort of like a checks and balance system. Okay? In the middle of the night, most people living with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes find that their blood glucose starts to creep up. They might go to bed with a good blood glucose of 100. They might wake up with a blood glucose of 140. And they say to themselves, well, that's weird. I didn't eat anything last night, so why did my blood glucose go up? And what's happening in this situation is that your liver is effectively overpowering or outcompeting the ability of your pancreas to manufacture insulin. So your liver is sort of drip irrigating glucose into your blood, and it's saying, here's a little glucose, here's a little glucose, here's a little glucose. And your pancreas has the beta cells, and their responsibility is to manufacture insulin. So your insulin manufacturing is also, your pancreas is drip feeding insulin into your blood. And what ends up happening in people living with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is that your liver has become sufficiently insulin resistant that your liver effectively overproduces glucose. And it starts to manufacture and release more glucose than your pancreas is able to keep up with. So as a result of that, you have a net increase in the amount of glucose in your blood while sleeping. You wake up with a high blood glucose and you say, that's weird, I don't understand what happened. A lot of people will now experience the minute they start to eat food. Breakfast rolls around, you start eating some food, and then you check your blood glucose 2 hours later and your glucose level is lower. Well, how can that be? The reason that happens is because you wake up and there's a lot of glucose in your blood and there's a little bit of insulin. As soon as you start to eat food, now your pancreas says, oh, I'm gonna make some insulin. So it makes a lot of insulin, and as a result of making a sufficient amount of insulin, your blood glucose then comes down. So middle of the night, liver is winning, pancreas is losing. In the daytime, pancreas is winning, liver is overpowered. And as a result of that, your blood glucose becomes more controllable. Hopefully that makes sense.
Brilliant. Okay, so we have an interesting comment here about a 17-year-old son who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes just 2 weeks ago. He was taken to the hospital via helicopter in DKA. And this person commenting wants to make delicious, yummy things that satisfy his sweet tooth. What do you suggest? Well, the good news is you can eat a lot of fruit on the Mastering Diabetes program.
Yeah, if you got a sweet tooth, join the club. I'm a sweet toothaholic. Yeah. So most people gravitate towards things like caramels and candies and Butterfingers and Snickers bars and chocolates when you have a sweet tooth. But rather than eating those refined packaged and processed foods, gravitate towards sweet fruit like bananas and papayas and mangoes and dates. And once you start to move towards those foods, your sweet tooth is fed very well, and you don't run as much of a risk spiking your blood glucose. In fact, your blood glucose becomes more controlled.
Yeah. So hopefully your son gets involved. I mean, certainly we both know what it feels like to just be diagnosed with type 1, but hopefully we can be reassuring in that he can still have an amazing high quality of life and enjoy his food and reach all his goals.
Okay, there's another question that comes in from Michael here, and it's what other things can you do to improve insulin sensitivity? Is it only about your fat intake? It's a great question. The answer is no. So yes, controlling your fat intake and reducing your fat intake is something that's going to definitely benefit you and improve your ability to control your blood glucose. There's no question about that. That's sort of your most powerful tool. But in addition to that, the Mastering Diabetes program, we teach the Mastering Diabetes method. And the Mastering Diabetes method is more than just the food that you put in your mouth. The Mastering Diabetes method encompasses a whole philosophy of a number of things that are going to improve your blood glucose control and hopefully get prediabetes and type 2 out of the way and help you control your blood glucose with precision when living with type 1 or 1.5. And so under the umbrella of the Mastering Diabetes method, we have a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. We also have intermittent fasting. Now, intermittent fasting is something that we teach, and we'll show you how to integrate it into your lifestyle. And then in addition to that, we also recommend daily movement. It doesn't have to be incredibly sophisticated. It doesn't have to be super high intensity. It's just moving your body on a daily basis and doing it consistently and using that as another insulin sensitizing tool. In addition, we also talked about incorporating Umla Green. Umla Green is the most powerful cholesterol reducing food on the planet. It's also very powerful at reducing your blood glucose and your blood pressure at the same time. So if you incorporate a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, daily movement, intermittent fasting, Umla Green, and reducing your stress, this is a quintuple whammy. And every single one of them helps boost your insulin sensitivity just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, to the point where you're an insulin sensitive machine, and that gives you the best chance of completely getting rid of all blood glucose concerns in the long term.
100%. Mastering Diabetes method is the way to go.
That's exactly right.
Okay, we have a good question here of some biochemistry, Cyrus. If insulin resistance is storage of fat in the liver and muscle cells, could you please explain to me how does the fat get into the cell? Why does it have precedence over the glucose? Does the fat need any kind of transmitter to enter the cells as the glucose needs insulin? Is maybe too much fat in the blood more dangerous than high glucose?
Okay, very good question. So this one comes from Eva. Eva, phenomenal question. Here's maybe somebody could help, either Jose or Kylie. Could you guys post the insulin resistance video? So we have a video that we, it was a presentation that I gave and Robbie gave part of at the Torrance Memorial Medical Center a couple of years ago. And Robbie's actually giving another presentation tomorrow at that same facility. And we filmed this presentation about what insulin resistance is and how to reverse it. And we put it on YouTube, and it went viral. Why? We still have no idea, but people apparently care about this topic. This video now has over 1.1 million views. And it's something that a lot of people have written to us that sort of clarified what insulin resistance is, why it's important, and how it contributes to diabetes. So in the chat box, you'll see this YouTube link right here. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Please click on that link and go watch that video. Set aside everything and just sit down for an hour and watch that video. And there you will get a really, really, really good understanding of the question you just asked. How does fat get in? Does it need regulation? What does it do once it's inside? How do you get it out? Blah, 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 blah. So please go take a look at that video, watch it, and if you have any more questions, please let us know.
Be the best investment of 45 minutes you probably have ever made. Okay, so we have somebody asking about gaining weight. How do I gain weight on a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet? The way to do that is to focus on more of the calorie-dense green light foods. So that means starting a meal, maybe your breakfast, when you're having fruit, instead of having berries, you would want to focus on foods like bananas, much more calorie-dense, figs, mango's a little more calorie-dense than things like berries. So we actually have a post on our website where we have listed all the green light foods in order of calorie density. So you would know which ones to focus on, particularly when it comes to fruit. When it comes to intact whole grains, beans, and starchy vegetables, those are all going to be quite calorie dense. So you want to eat more of those foods in order to increase your calorie consumption. And things like, in this case, if you are not living with insulin resistance and you're just trying to gain weight, like your blood glucose is under control, adding some things like dates or maybe some dried figs here and there, some of those foods can help you increase your calorie density and potentially gain weight. That's how it works.
Okay, so we got a really, really, really cool long question here from Andrea, but I think this is actually very important, so let's get into it. She says, I have two big questions to raise. I've been on a ketogenic diet for 2 years, and I reaped all the benefits that you acknowledged in the summit, which is likely reduced insulin use, improved blood glucose control, weight loss, etc. I lost 85 pounds. I watched the interviews with Dr. Osfeld and Dr. Furman and Dr. Barnard, and they spoke against the ketogenic diet in this summit. I want to be fair and open-minded, and I do believe that you have valid points that I've never heard of before. Yes, the ketogenic diet is popular. Can you summarize 5 specific and unquestionable points as to not do a ketogenic diet? And please make it easy to understand in all caps. Something I can tell my doctor and friends who are into the ketogenic diet, so your outlook for diabetes can grow in popularity and validity. Thank you. I appreciate this. There are other summits just like yours that advocate literally the exact opposite with board-certified doctors as panel speakers. Please give me 5 hard, specific, and scientific points that I can easily tell others about your viewpoint and your stance on diabetes. Andrea, this is a phenomenal question. I'm super glad we got this. Okay. if you are also in, you know, other people other than Andrea, if you're one of 486 other people who may also have this same question, please get out a pen and a piece of paper right now, and let's create this list together. It's very important. Okay. Number one, a ketogenic diet is a very effective short-term solution for blood glucose control and weight loss. So when you think of ketogenic diet, think short-term. However, scientific studies show that in the long term, people who eat more fat and more protein suffer from more metabolic diseases like high cholesterol, hypertension, cancer, and the ultimate endpoint, which is called all-cause mortality, which means that you will likely die from premature death of any cause. So point number one, ketogenic diets are very effective short-term solutions for weight loss and blood glucose control. In the long term, they increase your chronic disease risk. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, ketogenic diets do not reverse type 2 diabetes. People are always making this mistake, and people are always saying, oh, well, I was on a ketogenic diet, I lost a bunch of weight, and my diabetes went away. Your diabetes did not go away. You think your diabetes has gone away. Diabetes is still there. Diabetes is just quiet. It's just lurking in the background. And the reason for that is because when you eat a high-fat and high-protein diet, you become more insulin resistant over time. So that means that your liver and your fat start to use fatty acids as your liver and your muscle start to use fatty acids as a fuel, and they start to uptake it and store it and use it, and it becomes the fuel of choice. In this process, those tissues become less responsive to insulin. And as a result of becoming less responsive to insulin, they cannot respond to glucose when you eat it, when you eat carbohydrate-rich foods. So the numbers that you can achieve, your A1C value, your blood glucose value, all of those things will make you believe that type 2 diabetes is gone. But in reality, you have become so much more insulin resistant that in reality, type 2 diabetes is not gone. Type 2 diabetes exists. And the way that you can show and prove that type 2 diabetes exists is try and eat a banana. Try and eat a potato. The minute you put carbohydrate-rich foods into your mouth, your blood glucose goes through the roof. If you did not live with type 2 diabetes, your blood glucose would be nice and stable when you ate that fruit or piece of potato. But if because you have a fruit or piece of potato, your glucose goes up, that right there tells you that type 2 diabetes is still there. Number three. A ketogenic diet, like we said earlier, is a very effective way to lose weight, and losing weight is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. We want to lose weight, but what we're looking for is a solution that's going to work in the long term. And if we're constantly tricking ourselves into believing that weight loss and getting good blood glucose values is the only thing we're looking for, then you're missing the bigger point. Point number three, what I'm trying to say here is that people who consume high fat and or high protein diets end up with significantly increased risk for cancer in particular. And that's something that we're going to go into a lot more detail in sort of future content. Okay. So chronic disease in general, yes. Cancer, absolutely. It's not worth it. Just because you control your blood glucose and get it to a point where it looks like diabetes is gone, you basically trade it for another condition or another collection of conditions. Not worth it, in my opinion. Probably not worth it in your opinion. What else am I missing, Robbie? That's 3 points.
I mean, we could just talk directly about, the link with the saturated fat. You've already touched on that a little bit, but
yes. Okay.
But honestly, The person's asking for 5 points, and I think that's cool, but you really don't need 5.
You don't need 5, yeah.
Like these good ones right here are such a big deal. They're so, to me, just conclusive. I mean, if you want to add another point, you could say there is no long-term society or group of people or community of people who have been shown that they did this and had a great life. To the contrary, the only situation where people are talking about longevity and people living to their 80s, 90s, 100s with low to no chronic disease is only in groups of people that ate significant amount of carbohydrate-rich foods. You can learn about these by reading the Blue Zones. You can also read a book called Healthy at 100 by John Robbins. He covers some other groups of people. And then there's peer-reviewed evidence on people like the Tarahumara Indians in Mexico. And it's really unquestionable when it comes to longevity and what has been shown, what type of dietary pattern and lifestyle habits have led to long, good quality life. So you hear them talk about, the Inuits and the Maasai and all that stuff. Those people did not live long, healthy lives. That whole thing has been debunked. You can look into it, and it's just they're silly examples.
Yes, 100%. Longevity. So what Mastering Diabetes is about, what the ethos of Mastering Diabetes is about, is that we're teaching you not only how to maximize your insulin sensitivity and or reverse insulin resistance so that you can get rid of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes altogether and control type 1 diabetes with precision. We're teaching you that. We're also providing you information that will allow you to maximize the number of days you spend on this planet. A ketogenic lifestyle, a low carbohydrate, high protein diet, not a single version of these diets can ever claim that they're increasing longevity, because the scientific research shows the opposite. Okay? We want you to live healthfully and we want you to live a long life. Ketogenic diets absolutely cannot do that.
Another thing, if you want to get to 5 and add another point, you could say that, again, there is not one single peer-reviewed study that shows an improvement in insulin sensitivity when doing a ketogenic diet and not losing weight. Not a single study. Yet in our camp, you go through our history of reversing insulin resistance on a low-fat diet, you will see several examples of researchers showing dramatic improvements in insulin sensitivity without losing weight. James W. Anderson, 1979, University of Kentucky, is a great example. You can read there, and there's a lot more research that he had done, and it's just so clear. So there's really no evidence to the contrary there. The only way to improve insulin sensitivity without losing weight is a low-fat, plant-based diet.
Phenomenal point. Absolutely right. Okay, last question here from Andrea is, please explain why animal cholesterol is so bad. I'll tell you exactly why animal cholesterol is so bad. Okay, referring to it as animal cholesterol is actually a misnomer. Animal foods contain cholesterol. Plant foods, factoid, plants also contain cholesterol. Okay, even people in the whole food plant-based world get this wrong. People a lot of times they say you can't find cholesterol in plants. That is not a true statement. You can find cholesterol in plants. It's just at about 1/100th the concentration, or sometimes 1/1000th the concentration. So it's so small that it's effectively zero, and it doesn't pose metabolic risks. Okay, that's the first thing. So why is cholesterol such a problem? Because people who consume cholesterol in their food end up with higher blood cholesterol levels. And there are studies to show in more than 1 million participants around the world over the course of time that the higher your cholesterol level, the higher your LDL concentration goes, the greater your chance of death. Period, end of story. As your cholesterol level starts to creep up higher and higher and higher, your risk for cardiovascular disease goes up, your risk for premature death from any cause goes up. And so it's very important to keep your cholesterol very well controlled. And when you're consuming cholesterol from the outside world, you increase the chances of increasing your LDL cholesterol. So the simplest way to keep your LDL cholesterol controlled is to A, not eat animal products because they contain cholesterol. And then B, limit your saturated fat intake, because the more saturated fat you eat, the higher your LDL cholesterol will also go. So limit your cholesterol, limit your saturated fat, and as a result of that, you can keep your LDL cholesterol less than 100 and closer to 70. And if you can do that, then you can maximize the number of days you live on this planet and never have to deal with any version of cardiovascular disease.
Simple as that.
So,
I mean, we have again, if you want to add another point, it's becoming a very important one that we're learning more and more about today, is the microbiome. So what the research is showing on how plant-based diets can improve the microbiome and how, animal-based diets do not is pretty overwhelming and pretty clear at this point.
It's a very, very good point. Okay, so it looks like we've answered most of the questions. There's a couple of questions left, but it's also getting kind of late. Yeah. It's it's 9 o'clock, 9:15 on the East Coast, and I know people are sort of tired. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to end this mid-summit Q&A. Thank you all for showing up. There are 490 of you guys that are still here, which is phenomenal. We really appreciate your time, your attention, the fact that you're watching these interviews, that you're incorporating this information, you're making changes in your lives. That's exactly what we love to see. The Forks Over Knives Meal Planner is something that I think can greatly benefit a lot of people that are here. If you're in a position where you're trying to find ways to diversify your food intake, or maybe you just want to start a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet, please try the Forks Over Knives Meal Planner and just see what you think. There's no risk. If you like it, keep it. If you don't like it, don't keep it. It's fine. But get inside, start using it. Click on that link that you see on the offer and get involved in it, because it's a simple way to start the process. And it's something that, I kid you not, Robbie and I wish we had access to that back in the early 2000s when we had to make it work ourselves. Okay, we really do wish that there was something like that. But right now, there's literally more resources available to this community, to a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet, than there has ever been in the history of humankind. And the Forks Over Knives Meal Planner is something that can really take your game to the next level. So try it out. Let us know what you think. And we have another final webinar that's happening on Friday, March 15th at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific. Check your email. There will be another opportunity for you to register and participate. Friday, March 15th, 5 o'clock p.m. It's the day after the last day of the summit. Okay, March 14th is my mom's birthday. It is a Thursday. That is the end of the summit. The next day is the live wrap-up webinar. We will see you guys there.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks for attending.
Good night, everybody.